I want to ask you, what kind of inspired you to go into the world of consulting?
Yeah, well, consulting and research, again, it's because it's people. Like I um I really enjoy making individuals more productive and more successful. I enjoy making teams more productive and more successful, and then ultimately businesses.
So today I'm here with Laci Loew. And Laci, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being here and being here in support of our mission of getting free career advice to young adults from industry leaders like yourself. And in preparation for this interview, I was looking at your LinkedIn and looking at your career, and you have such a diverse and accomplished career. I just want to ask you, Laci, how do you define your career?
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Shane, for having me here today. It's really quite a pleasure. I'm really impressed with you and CareerRoad, so it's an honor for me to talk with you. To answer your question, I guess I'd start out before I tell you about my career, like defining the difference between career and job, in my opinion. Um, so job to me is sort of something that an individual may take on a short-term basis, short term maybe even being a year or two, but no real intent to stay in the same line of work. So you could sort of hop around from one position to another, but there's really not necessarily any continuity. So it could be, hey, you work in sales at an auto dealership, and then hey, you're going to go over and maybe be a recreational supervisor at a nearby youth center. So I find that a lot of people do engage in jobs because it provides a lot of variety, and they, kind of go back and forth with that. But I guess in a career, it's more for me. While there is variety within the career that I'll explain in my own kind of experience, there is sort of a red thread always in a career, regardless of how many different positions or organizations you work with. So for me, I really think of my career as a journey. It has kind of lots of twists and turns, and I look at those twists and turns as an opportunity, Shane, to really broaden my skills and my experiences broadly, kind of left to right and up and down. And that was really over the 40, 45 years I've been working. I first went to school at the University of Illinois, and I set out to study psychology and education. I thought I wanted to be a professor, and I imagined that my career would start with teaching younger children first, perhaps, and then I always desired to move into more of a professor level position, kind of research based at a university. So I completed that study. I had 2 degrees in psychology and education, and after graduating, I was thrilled to accept my first teaching position in a Chicago area elementary school. I'm from Chicago, so I got work there teaching third grade, and I was thrilled. Shane, it wasn't but a handful of months after I got into that position that I said, this is not for me. This feels like a job. It feels like it just didn't feel right. But what I did learn from that
Also,
role.
it's probably difficult to work with third
Yeah,
graders.
exactly. So, I didn't while I highly respect elementary school teachers, it wasn't for me. But what I did learn in that initial 5 months is I fell in love with the power of, both quantitative and qualitative evidence to validate, at that time, teaching theories and make better decisions around students, around people. But what I learned that I wanted to do through that work was really leverage data and evidence to work maybe with folks that were more of an adult age and in a corporate setting. So those titles today are sort of known as people scientist or HR consultant, even or HR analyst. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile, as you mentioned, you'll see kind of people scientist and HR analyst and consultant is in my description. As I mentioned, the red thread among all of that work is really data and people, and how you use data to make people decisions that are going to better business impact the business. So I was really keen to transition to the world of corporate and business where I could leverage, people or employee data in this case, all the way from frontline workers to leaders to figure out how leaders could make better business decisions around processes, around people, around hiring, around promoting, so that they would get better business impact. And by better business impact, I mean how their key metrics, like in an organization, they measure things like revenue or productivity or turnover or employee engagement. And so business leaders are always interested in making sure that those key business metrics are as best as they can be. And the people are what drive a business. So I was to use people data to help those leaders understand what talent decisions they needed to make in order to get better business results. So I was lucky enough to accept my first corporate position, as a manager of customer success with a local technology firm, in Skokie, Illinois, and I loved it. The challenges were plentiful. I grew my business skills by, going to school at night, for my MBA, and so I realized that I needed to have more, business acumen, in the world of corporate, than just education and psychology. So both from a experience on the job, and education, I was, furthering my skills.
When you took on that position, what was a typical day like for you?
Well, it was, I would say, it was a typical office job. So I'd get to work at about 8 in the morning. I would, probably leave about 6 in the evening. I was defining what customer success meant. So I would ask the customers, what do you like about interacting with this company? What do you not like? So that was the data that I was collecting. And then I would shape our processes, like how our call centers, like how many minutes or, they needed to be on the phone in order to satisfy a customer, or what was the average number of complaints that we'd get in per day, and around what area, so that I could use that data to inform product development and to inform customer service. So a lot of my day was around collecting data. A lot of my day was around speaking to the customers. And a lot of my day was around presenting upward to my leadership, like the C-level suite, about my findings so that we could shape and reshape strategy. So every day sort of had threads like that, but obviously the challenges were a little bit different. Um, but anyways, that opportunity, I reported at that time to the chief human resources officer and the CEO, and so I had a direct line to that C-suite, which really grew my skills quickly and opened opportunities for me in other areas of business. I was very fortunate to land positions at Motorola and United Airlines and LexisNexis, kind of sequentially there, with obviously different industries, but again with complex challenges around global employees and customer concerns. And again, what were those challenges? Well, as I mentioned, how do I keep employees engaged? Why are my employees not motivated? I think I could get more productivity out of my employees. How can I get better revenue? That type of thing. So the data kind of turned into me being, as I collected the data and shared upward, as I said in my first position, that kind of turned into, without an official title, of me being sort of a internal advisor to the C-suite. So they would ask me, yeah, and so that, that's where the consulting sort of came from. So they didn't want to hear anything from me, Shane, if I didn't have the data, right? It would be like, oh, well, that's your opinion, and everyone's got an opinion. So they're not going to make business decisions, right, without having the data. So anyways, that internal sort of advisory role, allowed me to get an offer with Accenture, which at the time was one of what we called the big five sort of consulting firms. So like Ernst and Young, KPMG, Accenture, those big five consulting firms in human resources and other areas.
Before we start shifting over to this talk about your time as a consultant, I know you said at this previous job or your first job, right? Your first experience, you had a direct line to the C-suite, correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
Were there any people at that top level, that C-suite level, who were really impactful in developing your career, like someone as a mentor, kind of?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Great. Well, one, I'm going to tell you how I got that direct line to the C suite, and then I'm going to specifically answer your question. Um, Because the company was a little bit smaller, it wasn't, a big global firm like I mentioned, Motorola or whatever, it was a little bit smaller. The layers of leadership were fewer. So I was as I said, I was the manager of customer success, and I reported to ultimately the individual who became my mentor forever, who was the chief human resources officer. And his name was Rory Zacks. And today, Rory is still a mentor of mine. And, Shane, I was astute enough to know that in order to grow my career, I needed to develop relationships with people. And the sooner I could connect at that higher level, the greater I, the greater the speed would be with which I would move. Not necessarily upward. Like I said, it could be laterally to grow skills, but, I would grow. Um, but in order to talk to the chief human resources officer and the chief executive officer, I needed to come with the data because otherwise, like I said, they weren't interested in paying attention. So, yeah. Um, did that answer the question?
It definitely did. And I also want to ask you a follow-up. How important would you say it is for young adults watching this video to seek a mentor if they want to be successful in their careers?
I would say 100% important. I cannot think of an opportunity I've had over 40 or 45 years I've been working that hasn't come as a result of building relationships, networking, and out of the entire network of people that you cultivate for yourself, you will start to see one or two start to maybe take a more pointed interest in your success and then sort of glomming onto them to kind of wring out of them every bit of knowledge they have. So yeah, I would say that's very very important. Whether you call it a mentor or just sort of a buddy, a friend that has been there, done that, and is going to help you out with more years of experience. Yes, very important.
Awesome.
So I went to kind of wrap up the career discussion. Then I after Accenture, which yeah, it was a consulting firm, but I was really again on the people scientist, HR research, data analytics side of it, informing sort of the consulting work that we did. So I sort of wore both hats, but I never did any consulting work without leveraging the data side of it. Through that work, I had lots of clients, Shane, that were big. I mean, for me, as I was probably 30 years old at that time. It was scary, to be honest. Like General Motors, Deutsche Bank, Kroger, BP. Like I'd be walking into these, CEOs and CHROs office, and yeah, I was a little intimidated, but the what I always held on to is, I'm trying to tell these folks why they should listen to me. And, they would always push back and say, why? And I'd say, here's the data, argue with the data, don't argue with me. So the data was sort of my life saving blanket. But anyways, I really, um, developed such great relationships with the people at these organizations that they started to sort of ask me on the side to do work for them. And I really could not do that out of the confines of Accenture, right? Like I had an employment, sort of contract with Accenture that would be a conflict of interest. So and I had to follow all of Accenture's sort of, research and consulting methodology, which while I highly, have great regard for Accenture, sometimes it's um, a little bit bureaucratic because of the size of the organization. So I decided, you know what? I wonder if I start my own business. So I wanted to dip my toe into entrepreneurship now. If I start my own business under, the research consulting and advisory services, through the lens of data, what would that be like? So I did that because now I can service these customers, with my methodology and at my speed and my pace. And the more I could service, the more money I could earn. Um, it's not all of a glamour story, running your own business because you have to go out and hustle and be on the sales side too, to get the clients. And the sales side of it wasn't necessarily my love. The data was my love and being able to get them better business impact. So, but I did that for 7 or 8 years, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the flexibility of it, and making my own rules and things like that. So for some, the entrepreneurship works. Um, Anyways, while I in the lens of that, one of my former companies that I worked for, LexisNexis, who was at the time all under like risk mitigation, and they really weren't thinking about the strategic side of people at the time, which was 20 some years ago. They invited me back just recently, within the last few years, to kind of lead all the research for them around strategic HR, and strategic HR meaning how to leverage people to get better results, right? So I did that for them for the last couple of years, until I sort of, checked out formally of the corporate full time, work in January of this year. But I'm really still engaged in the community. I write a lot for Forbes. I don't know if
Really?
you, yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, HR business, Harvard, business analytics. I'm on an advisory panel for them, and just lots of some other clients like the Global Curiosity Institute in Belgium. So yeah. So, anyways, I still stay engaged because I really love the work. And people, I would say in general, are gray and messy, right? No two people are alike, right? But the data always informs how to get them to be better performers, and I love that.
And Lacey, I want to ask you, you said at your time at Accenture, you had companies and people asking you to work privately for them, correct?
Yeah.
So, what do you think you were doing differently, or what was unique about you that you were so desirable for these companies and you ended up even starting your own business?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's the personality and the follow through. Like, to be in the line of work that I'm in, you really sort of have to be, kind of a self starter, and a lot of drive, and a lot of self discipline and execution, all with sort of you know a happy personality, shall I say, right? Like when I worked for Accenture, those clients were paying big money for that consulting work, and nobody really, and the engagements were long, like multi-month efforts, right? So it's not, when you're trying to fix challenges in the corporate world, it's not something that you can fix in a week or two or a month. And at the same time, if you're on staff, kind of pseudo on staff with them for a few months, they want results, right? So I was all about, being able to demonstrate the results. So I wouldn't just give them new processes to do and then leave, right? It was, I would hang around to make sure that they were getting the impact. And a lot of consultants don't necessarily do that. So sometimes consultants get a bad rap in the world.
What would you do if they weren't getting the results they were looking for? Because you said you would hang around
Yeah.
and they're getting those results.
Yeah, you know what, Shane, that never happened, because this is what I would do is I would say when I started the work, I would always lead with, what does the situation look like today? Let's take, for example, employee turnover. What is it today? Is it, what's your metric today, and what do you want it to be? Right? So they would define what success looks like. That's very key in consulting, is the owner, the stakeholder defines what success is, not me. So once they tell me what success looks like, now I have to drive towards that number. So once I get to that result, then we both agreed that that's what success looks like, right? So, again, I'm oversimplifying it. I'm not saying it's easy, but always get the stakeholder, the person paying for the work, the
Yeah.
one that you have to satisfy to
Get
define
them to
success.
define their goals. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. I understand that. That's
exactly.
so I want to ask you, what kind of inspired you to go into the world of consulting?
Yeah, well, consulting and research, again, it's because it's people. Like, I um I really enjoy making individuals more productive and more successful. I enjoy making teams more productive and more successful, and then ultimately businesses. So Yeah. So, I find that when people are successful, that's very fulfilling for individuals, teams, and businesses. It's uplifting, it's fulfilling, it's motivating. You see the results in their behavior, in their paycheck, in their performance, in their responsibilities. And that really drives me. It's very depressing for me to be around people that aren't. Happy, aren't fulfilled, aren't successful, right? So if I can have any hand in helping that at any of those levels, individual, team, business, that's what made me want to sort of go into work with people or consulting. But in order to be successful at it, I knew I needed the data behind it. So that's why that's very much why I leaned on the people scientist side of the consulting equation.
What skills and qualities would you say are essential for people to succeed in analyzing data and using data to create a positive impact in other businesses?
Yeah, I would say the couple of skills. One is knowing what questions to ask. So, lots of times people come to you with problems, and they think they know the solution, but that might not be the solution at all. For example, somebody may say, our call center is not, turning over calls as quickly as we need it to do so. We need a training program. Well, a training program might not be the answer. It might be the process, maybe the operational process is broken. So knowing what questions to ask is one of the key skills. Another one is being ultra smart on, kind of current solutions that are out there. Like, for example, today, if you were to disregard culture or disregard inclusivity or disregard multi generations in a workforce, right? All of those are showstoppers. And all of that stuff changes all the time in the world of people, Shane. Like, right when 20 years ago, we didn't have five generations in the workforce. So being current on what the problems and challenges are with people or employees, and a third skill I would call out is problem solving. So now that you've asked the right questions and you have the data, there might be six different solutions to the challenge. What is the best solution for time, money, effort? Right. So always those three legs of the stool: time, money, effort. You're balancing to get to the best solution. Right.
Yeah, so I want to talk more about that first leg of the stool. You said asking the right questions. How can people know what questions to ask, and how do they know if they're asking the right questions?
Yeah, listening very carefully to what the problem is. So when somebody, when a leader asks, a consultant or a researcher, hey, I've got this problem. The questions to ask are, you're focused around: is it an operational issue? Is it a people issue? Is it a budget issue? Is it a time issue? So there's certain filters that you have, that are sort of steadfast. But again, you exploring all of those, not just assuming it's one of them, right? Like, it is pretty common, the example I gave, for leaders to kind of throw training programs at a problem. Like, if their employees aren't performing, then they automatically assume it's a training issue, like they don't have the right skills. So knowing, to explore the different areas that could possibly be culprits for the issue, and being comfortable, probing around those questions.
Definitely. And I also want to ask you, what do you think has been the biggest challenge in doing research and consulting? And is there a specific challenge that comes to mind that you had to face?
Yikes. I'd say there's more than one. I'd say one of the biggest challenges is senior leadership's resistance to change. So, you know, even if an organization is performing well, they can always do better. But, you have to really bring again, to some strong data to ignite them to want to make a change. Change is hard at an individual level, team level, business level, right? And so, and it takes time to affect a change. So there's a lot of resistance to change. And when you use data in consulting for people, there are a lot of stakeholders involved, because if you think about it, people in a business, it used to be like, here's the finance group, here's the HR group, here's the marketing group, here's the ops group. It's not like that. The HR group is not vertical. The HR group is horizontal, because people run through all those columns, right? So,
Definitely.
yeah, so you might get one or two or three stakeholders to buy in. Finance leader and ops leader and CEO might be all on board, but marketing or product or whatever, they're not on board. They're resistant to what you want to change. So stakeholder management and change resistance are problems. The rate of change, especially today, you get your arms around, what success looks like, and then it's morphing like every day, every week. So you got to keep current on that. Data quality is another issue with this work. Like, you can only produce as great of a solution as the data that you're using. So if your data is tainted, or it's too narrow, like you don't get enough data points, or it's old and dated, it's that's a challenge. So quality of data and research. And then another one that I'm going to mention is, functional areas of a business like finance or sales, they're used to data, Shane, but HR is not. Data analysis is pretty new to HR teams. Yeah, so that's another challenge, is getting HR leaders who are responsible for people to understand what we mean by data analytics and people science work, Um, and then lastly, I'd say I told you there was more than one. Um, Another challenge is, two other challenges I'll mention is meaningful metrics. So I said up front, have them decide what success looks like. So that's a key one, is tell me the metric that you want to get to so that we know what the target is, right? So that's a challenge, is getting them to zero in on that. And then finally, communicating the results succinctly. So, how do you present the results? Is it through a story? Is it a research report? Is it a scorecard that you present to leadership and they cascade it down through the organization? So, kind of distilling all the learnings from the data and creating some sort of a communication tool that is makes sense to all the leaders. That's a challenge as well. So, yeah.
So, one of those challenges that really stood out to me is this idea of getting leadership to accept change and then being resistant to change. How do you motivate leadership to accept change?
Yeah, well, I would say, start with the greatest naysayer. So if you've got 5 leaders in an organization, or 15, or whatever it may be, find the one that is, the one that is always the naysayer, right? That never thinks anything's gonna work. That's the person that you wanna convince. And the way that I convince them, you're probably tired of hearing this from me, but bringing the data forward. So I show that leader, hey, these are the results that you're going to get. You're going to get, 3% increase in revenue. Here's the data. You're going to get, 5% less turnover in key talent. You're going to get 2% greater productivity if you do these things. Do you want to do that, or do you want to stay where you're at? Right. So, and then when they challenge me and they say, well, how do you know that's true? Like, how do you know that
Yeah,
if I do
I
these?
just wanted to ask you that question.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then I bring forward examples of it. So here's this organization, this organization, this organization, this organization, right? And I write that up in research reports, like I call it case studies or caselets, where I get permission from organizations that have agreed to partake, right? Then I record their results in some sort of a report or a document that I can share with potential other clients, right? And so I say, look at what these organizations got by doing this, right? That's really hard to argue with, right? So then they pay attention. Then they set up and pay attention a little bit more. And it's not a slam dunk. They don't say, okay, sign me up for everything, but they'll usually say, yeah, let's give it a try. We'll try it for 45 days or 90 days or whatever it may be, and see what kind of impact we get. So again, I would always say, arm yourself with the data in this world of research and consulting. And that's how you're going to get the people that hold the checkbook is the
Yeah,
one that you want to talk to, and those are usually the C-suite people, right? And find the one that's the biggest naysayer, because if the biggest naysayer gets on board, then the others are a slam dunk, right?
definitely. So now I want to kind of talk about what industry changes have you seen over the years?
Oh goodness. Certainly, the two that come to mind are the culture of a workforce and technology. So let me talk about culture first. So, in the world of employees and people, the pendulum always swings back and forth in terms of, sometimes we call it, an employer focused or an employer favored kind of economy or environment, and then swings over to an employee sort of focused. So the difference is, kind of who holds the upper hand in decisions. So let me give you sort of a more recent example, COVID, right? So during COVID, a lot of businesses shut down, they went on hiatus. Um, Employees were out of work, things of that nature. So and they were sent away from the office, right? So when work started to come back up, and COVID started to subside, employees were already working at home. So many businesses that were only in office work and didn't allow flexible or alternative or remote working had to adapt to that, because employees would say, well, hey, I just showed you I could do the work from home. I don't want to go into the office 5 days a week. So that's one thing that has changed, is sort of like the nature of the workforce, whether it's employee or employer focused. The culture of the workforce. Like, only in the last 5, 8 years have we talked a lot about it being human centric and inclusive, right? Before, it was pretty, you are an employee first and a human second. That's not the case today. Today, it's you are a human first and an employee second. So leaders need to be, they need to take care of their employees, because if they don't, their employees will go elsewhere. They will find opportunities that are aligned with their values, especially employees of your age. They are values driven, right? So if they will not work for an organization that doesn't align with their personal values, right? Um, they have you are a classic example. You have busy lives, right? And they need flexibility. So again, they want some type of alternative working arrangement. We have multiple generations in a workforce. That's been a change. That is never the case in the past. So, people as old as me, they need to figure out how to work with people as young as you. And we need to respect each other for the skills we bring. And there's a lot still today of what I'll call the old boys network, which is, the old white dude thinks he's the only person that has the right answer. And that's just not the case, right? We have all sorts of people that look different, have different experiences, are of different ages. And those organizations that are most successful really respect and value the changed workforce that we see today, multi generational, and people that don't look and feel like the traditional C suite, right? What the traditional C suite has been. So that's all of those changes around. Pay equity is another one. That's huge. Um, this whole concept of, the glass ceiling and equitable pay. So, folks that are newer entrants into the workforce, are they getting paid, a fair salary compared to people that have been in the workforce already? So that's, sort of sorting today, pay equity and fairness in the workplace. That used to never be an issue. So the younger workers are bringing that forward, so that's great. um, so a whole lot of issues around, people and workforce challenges, right? That I just and inclusivity and fairness, right? And people first, employees second. And then, of course, technology, right? Like, again, with COVID, yeah, we had businesses before that were using like Zoom or Teams or, things like that, but not to the extent that they did when COVID hit. So technology like was basically the only way we could get work done because you couldn't go, and necessarily have a face-to-face meeting in the office when you were relegated to home to get work done. So technology, my gosh, Shane, I can remember when I went to work for Motorola, if I brought this mobile phone in, I would be fired. So we couldn't even, yeah, we couldn't even have mobile phones. And we were a mobile phone provider. We made mobile phones, but we couldn't even have them on our person, right? Today, that's unheard of. So, like, you get work done through technology today more so than ever in the past. And particularly this whole concept of AI, generative AI, and the risks and opportunities it brings to business, that is so new. People are figuring out what that means. And a lot of more immature organizations, the employees there think, oh, I'm going to be out of work because, this AI is going to do my job. The more mature organizations that are getting their arms around it and getting better business results say, oh, no, the AI just does the routine and the mundane. So I can get AI to schedule meetings or sort papers or, prioritize lists. I need the human to engage where there's critical thinking, complex problem solving that AI hasn't been able to solve yet and probably won't for several more years, right?
And
So
I wanted to ask you this earlier, but as you've pointed out, we've been talking about data a lot. And I wanted to ask you, how do you actually find and collect the data that's telling companies or telling you that, hey, maybe if you try this, your revenue will increase by 5% every year or something of that matter?
yeah, that's a great question. So there's two ways I do it. Primary research, quantitative research through surveys, and then qualitative research through interviews with stakeholders. So two different things, qualitative and quantitative, and I marry them. But generally, how I start is with a survey to a target population. So let's say, for example, an organization says, we have culture issues, right? We have a lot of turnover. We're getting complaints from employees that we don't have, values aligned with employees' values. Um, we have disgruntled employees. It seems as if our pay ranges aren't, sort of equitable with our competitors. So I'll put together a survey, right, that gets to those issues. So I have to be sharp enough, smart enough in my subject area to hypothesize what the answers should be, right, so that I create response options that sort of run from you're doing it all wrong or least mature to you're doing it all right, most mature, right? And then I send that survey out to stakeholders. So in this case, the example I just gave, employees, right? So if an organization wants improvement there, I would send out that survey to all their employees, right? I would collect the data back and show. And another key aspect of that survey is I'd ask them to self-assess where they are on key business metrics. So you know how I told you I tie it to the business metrics? So now if they tell me, "Oh, they don't even understand what I'm doing, but here's the link." So they tell me their revenue, their productivity, their time to market, right? And then I look at how they're performing on those questions I asked. Now I can correlate the results. So if you don't pay fairly, if you don't treat employees as humans first, right? If you don't have flexible work arrangements, if you're not focused on well being, if your leaders aren't authentic, your business results are lower. Look at these organizations where I ran the same survey. If they have inclusive cultures, their business metrics are higher, right? So that's how I can get the data and then tie it to business impact, right? And then on the qualitative side, I go conduct interviews, right? So I'll do interviews with leaders and focus groups with employees. And I get anecdotal data back that provides color to those quantitative results. So now I can tell stories straight from the leader's mouth and the employees' mouths about how that quantitative data correlates to those business impact. Like they tell me what it feels like to work in this organization, right? What they like about it, what they don't like about it. And that's what causes somebody to go, oh, I get it now. I get what you're talking about, right? So I bring those two together, the quantitative and the qualitative, and share that. That's how I get the data.
So, Lacey, obviously your career path wasn't very linear whatsoever. But for young adults who may know or want to get into the industry of research and consulting, what do you think the best path is for them to take?
Yeah, definitely a kind of two-pronged area, I would say, the business side of it. So something with business acumen, typically an MBA or, some sort of a degree, and even a bachelor's of business, right? That gets you sharp in understanding kind of all areas of business, right? And then, a data degree, right? Something on the data side that helps you understand the questions you're asking me. How do you get the data? How do you know the data is real? How do you know, how to analyze the data? What does it mean if the data, doesn't have the, regression factors and, that type of thing, validity. So understanding what data means, you can get some of that from a psychology degree. My original psychology degree helped me with that, but really focused in that area. And certainly, Shane, the AI component of it. Lots of certificates. You don't even necessarily have to have a degree, but certificate and understanding around AI would be very helpful. So those are the two areas that I think you should that a person interested in this field should get sort of immersed in, whether it's through experience and or formal education.
Awesome. So finally, Lacey, you've given a lot of really good advice throughout this interview, but I want to ask you, what is one final piece of advice you want to leave young adults watching this video with?
Hmm. I would say, and I won't even necessarily tie it to my specific career in HR research and analytics and consulting and people science. I would say, if I were a young adult today, the best advice I have is whatever line of work you think you want to be in, go shadow somebody who's in that line of work for several weeks or even months if you can. Get in the shoes of the person so that you can see what it's like. Because then when you ask me the question, what does the day in, day out look like? It's real easy to dismiss that by just listening to an interview like this. But if you actually sort of experience it, then that's when you can say, I really like this stuff, or this is not for me. If I had done that, Shane, way back when, there is no way I would have ever done a dual degree with one of them being education. No way. So, um, honestly,
But
that's
even so, do you think that degree benefited you, like even today?
I do because it's the area that introduced me to data, right? So when I was talking to parents and school administrators about performance of students, again, it couldn't be because Lacey said so, right? It couldn't be on hunches or because I thought the kid was cute or not cute, right? I had to have the data, right? So that it opened my eyes to what it meant to give a student a grade or to pass judgment in a statement on a report card about their behavior or their performance that wasn't gut level, that wasn't opinion, that was all data. So that is what really caught, because otherwise I said to myself, I can't go into a school administrator meeting or a parent teacher conference with an opinion when I'm talking about someone's kid here, right? So that was very helpful, but I probably um, could have spent less money and less time by focusing more on the data side and the business side. Yeah, so that's why I suggest that. But it was useful. It just was more costly to me paying back student loans, and chewed up a bunch of time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Lacey, that's all the questions I have for you today. And for those of you watching, if you want to get more advice from Lacey, go to careerroad.org, find Laci Loew's profile, and feel free to ask her questions. And Laci, again, thank you so much for coming out and supporting our mission of getting free career advice to young adults all across the nation from industry leaders like yourself. It was awesome talking to you today. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you, Shane. My pleasure as well. I look forward to the next time.